today's Gen Z generation is going to have even a more complex time than ever before trying to deal with where do I get my information, what's true, what's not, right? And how do I form my different opinions? And I think ultimately, at least what I'm seeing, my teenagers and my college students doing is really, they're pulling from all their different sources of information. And I think that's where this kind of expert influencer starts to play a really important role. The consumer knowing that, hey, this might not be the end story and the whole story, but this is this is creating a combination for me so that I can get a better feel for what's going on with my dog or what's going on with my cat or how I might want to treat it together with my veterinarian's recommendation, right? And so I think there's a very, very real space there for sure. I think it's super interesting. I love to try something like that.
Welcome back to Generation Influence, a new podcast that goes behind the scenes to talk to the marketers and leaders driving the influencer marketing and e-commerce spaces. I'm your host, Bill Hildebolt, and I'm the co-founder of gen.video, a platform in the space. Today's guest is really exciting, a friend going back many years and one of the preeminent pioneers in CPG e-commerce, Laura Gustafson, who is currently the Senior Director, E-commerce and Consumer Engagement, Global Growth and Innovation at Elanco Animal Health.
Hi, guys.
Welcome, Laura.
Thanks.
Tell us about your career trajectory and how you ended up at Elanco.
Elanco Animal Health is actually kind of a boomerang job for me because I started a while back wanting to be a veterinarian. And so I have an undergraduate in pre-veterinary medicine, and I thought for sure that I would be spending my days treating dogs and cats and other little pets to help get them better. Ultimately, though, I ended up going to business school instead of vet school. And so my first role or set of roles was at Kimberly Clark. And I was a brand manager on Huggies brand and Pull-Ups and on Goodnight's brand. And Bill, that's when I first met you. When I was in the baby care space at Kimberly Clark. Spent many good years doing some fun brand stuff. And then something called shopper marketing hit the scene. It was kind of this sexy new way to think about marketing in between all the trade dollars that we were spending at retail and all of the upper funnel dollars we were spending on TV and cool things that we were doing on baby care brands that looked more like Huggies baby diaper races and fun stuff like that. So shopper marketing was a new capability at Kimberly Clark, and I spent time still on the brand teams for several years, again, in our baby care brands. Really defining what shopper marketing meant for KC and thinking about how you integrated brand strategy into the kind of the tools and trade of shopper overall. And that was a really fun way to spend some years. And eventually I got excited about how you could take some key truths that really served themselves well across our baby care brands, across all 10 KC brands. And so started spending some time thinking about, from an enterprise perspective, what the capability meant. And that led me down a path that turned a little bit into digital and turned into e-commerce, because at the time, shopper was just on the edge of trying to figure out what Google search meant and what Facebook meant. And all our retailers were trying to figure out the same thing. And oftentimes I felt like I was a doctor that played one on TV. I could say the answers, but I didn't really know what I meant. Luckily, I had a CMO and support structure at KC that gave me the opportunity to take a digital role on in our femcare brands, the Poise and the Kotex and the Depends of the world. And I learned a lot about digital strategy. And that was a great opportunity for me to broaden my horizons. Ended up with the role ultimately I had at KC, which was leading e-commerce marketing. And at the time, we had an Amazon customer that was really doing a little bit of business for us, but we didn't know how to handle e-commerce really. And we were at the tipping point of kind of some of the consumer behavior around paper and diapers as consumers first started to buy online. And so it was an exciting time. It was a small team and we got to really accelerate quickly. We made a lot of really good decisions and we made some bad decisions too. And so it was fun to learn. I went from Kimberly Clark then to General Mills, wanting to apply the things that we learned in accelerating and growing e-commerce in the paper category to see if the same thing could be applied to food. And it turns out it can be. And so it was an exciting 6 years I spent at General Mills, ultimately leading e-commerce marketing and strategy across our pure play customers. And it was a really fun time as customers like Instacart and Shipped and Amazon Fresh really hit their stride, especially as COVID came on in the spring of 2020, as everybody experienced the acceleration of e-commerce overall. Ultimately, though, General Mills was really in a great spot on e-commerce, and I had an opportunity through a friend of mine to think about eComm and acceleration and growth in the animal health space. I hadn't spent any time in pharmaceutical before, and I'm always up for a new challenge. And Bill, you probably know, trying something new for the first time, whether it works or not, is kind of what gets me up every morning. And so it was a neat idea to be able to take the skill set that I had learned at General Mills and Kimberly Clark and apply that in the animal health space and start to help to see if we can transform Elanco animal health through the e-commerce landscape.
I love it. That was a great tour de force. Very,
Awesome.
very fast, but you covered a lot of things. I don't know if you could tell. I was like madly scribbling notes. I'm going to go back to that. 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 And I'm going to go back at first to actually the first thing, which is this is going to be a little bit of a non sequitur to the topic of the podcast generally. But I love that you started, thinking that you wanted to be a vet, and it's really interesting. Scott Galloway, who you may know, and some of the readers will know, right?
He's awesome.
He's awesome. Says a lot of great things. My favorite thing though that he's ever said is he's got this thing about following your passions and whether or not one should follow your passions.
Yes.
Suffice to say, you actually followed Scott's advice in getting your MBA and going down a path that was, I certainly at the time, the path less traveled, but sure. It's funny but there is something that he discounts in that about the value of your passions. And it's awesome how you've kind of brought it full circle and never completely let go of that dream. And so that's amazing.
One of the things that was really fascinating to me, honestly, and the parlay into business school was I'd worked for a lot of veterinarians, and veterinarians are amazing people. They're incredible, just folks with huge hearts that this is about a passion for animals, and this is about a passion for helping people and their pets, which is incredible. Not always does that transition into fantastic business acumen. And so I worked for a lot of folks that were kind of giving away the practice on a daily basis. Just in the sense of, they just wanted to help, but that didn't mean that their business was in the black, right? It was kind of in the red. What I was particularly curious was, could you do both, right? Could you find a way to kind of hit that right stride between, wanting to be a profitable business, but also helping people and their animals as well. And that's something I think that really drew me ultimately back to this space is, could I come in and provide that help through an e-commerce lens? So
I love that.
About why I'm here.
Yeah, no, I love that. And actually it's interesting because there is this, point where you are trying to do good for the world. But the critical thing is you also have to do good for yourself, or you can't continue to provide that, right?
That's
It's not sustainable to be in the red forever. And so that is a very honorable thing to figure out. How do we make this sustainable? And we may be talking about a different kind of sustainable than everybody, the sustainability movement of the day, but they come from the same place. Like, how do we do something that can last? So that's great. Right. I want to talk about shopper marketing, and I don't mean to age you, but circa 2009, according to LinkedIn, is when you started in shopper marketing. And you validated it was new to Kimberly Clark at the time, but just really quickly, tactically, what was it? Is that coupons in the Sunday paper? Was this
News America?
Sort of digital? Yeah, News America, right? Like at the shelf.
C&D counties?
Right. So what is it? What was it, or not is it? What was it then?
Shopper marketing then was a lot of circulars in store, right? It was a lot of, how do you interrupt the shopper in store? So it was in shelf and in aisle signage. It was tear pads at the shelf. It was, how do you connect what's in the circular with what's in store? How do we make sure feature and display is really strong and connected into our activations? There was this newfangled thing called segmented marketing and segmented email, right? Where you could maybe email people about what was in the circular, and maybe they would come in and buy your things, and could you connect what was in the circular with your email communication? And so there was a lot of that. There, FSIs was clearly a huge component of what we as brands spent dollars on. And then coupons.com was an early mover in the space. Coupons.com, you could put coupons up on their site, that was, your national coupons, and then consumers could download those and use them in store. And so there was a big component of that as well.
So it's interesting because it's all about creating like these multiple connections between different touch points and being in the right place at the right time, which is a theme of another one of the podcasts in the series, is like being present at the moment when the shopper's ready, wherever that is, which has only gotten more complex. But you mentioned, right, that there were some things you learned at that point that, that were lessons you carried forward. Could you go a little deeper on what were some of those, or even just the disciplines that you learned at the time that you still feel like, yeah, I'm good at this because I started there?
I'd say, to me, the one thing that really stands out is, we like to be linear thinkers. We like to think that everything can be ducks in a row and kind of fall in line and it all makes sense, right? And so we thought about shopping as this kind of linear progress event, right? You made a shopping list. People had a physical shopping list, and that they had in their refrigerator or in their house or something like that. And, as you made your shopping list, you decided what you wanted, and then you figured out what coupons you could clip out of the newspaper or out of a circular, or maybe it was crazy, you could go online and find a coupon type of thing. And we thought then there was a bunch of research going on like that. And then we thought there was a planned event where people would go in store and they'd plan the trip on a Sunday, or they'd, shop on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And we thought that shopping happened in a very, organized fashion, right? So people would have a route through the store, and okay, fine. And so there was this very linear journey through the shopping cycle. And we thought, okay, well, if we can just know that journey and impact it, we're good to go. And I think what really rattled everybody's cages, and what took a while for us all to get our heads wrapped around, and those of us who were able, if you could get your head around this, I think those were the accelerators in the space, truly, is the fact that the shopping journey is not linear. It's a web, right? And with the advent of all things digital and technology, things were interconnected on a very regular basis, and a level that it was unprecedented, really. And how to influence a hyper connected web-like journey, which is no longer a journey. The word journey doesn't apply anymore, was something that you had to get okay with the chaos, right? You had to get okay with the idea that you're not going to know step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's not always going to happen like that. But then the challenge is where do you park your dollars, right?
Yeah.
And where in that web is the right way to inform how you spend. And so from those early days, some work actually that our agency partners did over at WPP was super in getting really disciplined around what is the consumer's journey in the category? What do we know about the consumer? And where are those potential inflection points where shopping kind of comes to mind, right? And again, it's not always in the same place at the same time. And starting to understand that consumer journey, and then applying this kind of web-like shopper experience people are having, or shopping experience people are having, was really started to become kind of the core truths for me that I applied throughout my career.
That is awesome. I can totally reframe my own behaviors through that framework, and makes me feel better because like
There
I
you
know
go.
in my mind, you're somewhat you're in this space as a professional, but then you're also in this space as as a consumer and a shopper.
Yeah.
And when I try to compare the two, I'm always like, well, I'm just chaos. Maybe I'm just the exception, but I think you just validated my
Yeah.
behavior. So thank you.
Yeah.
It's the feel good moment of the day.
There you
So
go.
your newest titles and responsibilities, and again, maybe sometimes comparing a title and actual responsibilities could be dangerous, but I'm going to do it, right? It includes the phrase consumer engagement.
Yay.
And yes, and I don't feel like I see that in a lot of e-commerce / shopper marketing roles. It feels like somebody in comms could get their back up that you've got this title included. And so in this context, what does consumer engagement encompass? And what are you trying to do with that lofty responsibility?
Awesome. Great question. So this is one of my favorite parts about my role here at Elanco. So I've got a huge passion in general about what does org look like in a commerce digital world, because I've got a belief that commerce more so than ever before is what's driving our full CPG marketing kind of exercise right now, in the sense that retail media is offering unprecedented audience segmentation and access to consumers like we've never had before. And so as you draw a line through the funnel, I like to think about performance marketing, and I like to think about full funnel experiences for our dollars, and really being able to attribute behavior and activity throughout kind of the reach all the way through conversion at retail. And so to me, consumer engagement combined with e-commerce, e-com at the end of the day is a collapse of sales and marketing together. That to me is what's so fun about e-commerce. Consumer engagement is about how do you create a clickable path to purchase, for me, from every digital touch point. Because at the end of the day, we are for-profit companies, and we're trying to create conversion events for consumers and really trying to make things more efficient for those of us who are shopping in a web-like world, right? And the more that we can connect the way in which we engage consumers, with how we convert consumers on our brands, I think that becomes really, really powerful. There's platforms out there right now who are scaling pretty massively. So the Fetches of the world, Brand Club, which is a new offering from Stackline. These are big audience-based conversion platforms that allow you 1P data access to consumers and the ability to cut and segment your audience and create unique consumer behavior like never before. And certainly they've got a huge influencer aspect to it as well, noting the power of kind of social and sharing as it relates to kind of good deals and ways to get dollars off on your stuff. So to me, that's the most exciting part about my job, is combining the two.
You've worked in CPG generally, right? Kimberly Clark,
Mm-hmm.
grocery, a subset of that, but a unique subset, and then now animal health. And I'm going to say it loud and proud. Those to me are not the easiest e-commerce categories to operate in. And so, one of our other verticals that we work with a lot in gen.video is consumer electronics. And in so many ways, it's so much more direct. I mean, so much of the purchase behavior is online. So much of the research is very visibly online and in very specific places. You don't have that luxury.
No.
And so does that mean that you're always needing to take into consideration halo effects at brick and mortar? Or are we at the point where we can do online activations and measure the results purely in terms of e-commerce? I mean, what are the implications of that web and how far you have to reach to tie things back together, or attempt to tie things back together?
That's a great question. I mean, So that's the golden goose question, which is we live in an omni-channel world, and omni-channel can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. For me, what it means is that you've got one consumer who's experiencing in store, they're experiencing online. For us in animal health, they're experiencing in clinic because they are visiting their veterinarian with their pets. And so that adds a whole nother 9 yards to the exercise, because you've got influencers in the form of veterinarians or doctors that are, very relevant in these pet owners' lives. And so there's kind of there's many angles as it relates to, how we think about how folks kind of interact. And so we have to be thinking about the consumer's full experience, right? So we don't have the luxury of being able to say, let's just look at what consumers are doing online, or let's just build an experience for consumers online. You have to think about their full footprint. Otherwise, you're not really doing your business justice. You're not doing the category your justice, and you're not designing an experience that reflects what the consumer expects. And so, we have to measure online and offline. We have to design our experiences online and offline. And again, sometimes we call that O&O, online and offline. Sometimes we call that omni-channel. But really thinking about how do you use dollars? How do you design experiences? And how do you measure across a consumer's full experience set is the challenge today. And again, in animal health, like I was saying, we've got in-clinic experiences. And so we need to hook together the in-clinic experience that you're having. Do you have a dog or a cat, Bill? I can't remember.
I do not.
You don't. You need a pet.
No,
I have a few. Can you see the pictures up there? I have a
Yes,
few pets.
they are awesome.
Exactly. So if you take your pet into the doctor, that doctor is going to make a recommendation. And sometimes you can buy that stuff online. Sometimes you can't buy it online. You have to buy it in clinic, and it all kind of depends. And so that full attribution is really what we're after. And so I think that you are absolutely right that the categories I am in are not the easiest categories from an e-commerce perspective, but to me, they're the most exciting because that's where the challenge lies. I don't like an easy task. I like something that's interesting and difficult. So,
look at that big smile, which just
right.
clearly indicates you're telling the truth there. It's good job protection too. It's not easy.
That's
right. And I think it's going to stay challenging for a few years to come. I'll pick up on the thread that you said, you use the words, right? The veterinarian as influencer. There is which in the traditional sense, absolutely 100% true, right? I'm going to listen to my veterinarian. I have a high confidence that's going to be the case. And anything they recommend, I'm going to take very, very seriously. It's a little different than sort of the vernacular today, influencer meaning a YouTube or TikTok star.
That's right.
Now, what we've actually seen I'd say in the last 2 years in especially YouTube land and maybe a little TikTok land, is real doctors are now coming online, and they are building YouTube channels, and they are charismatic. There's one doctor whose YouTube channel is on a billboard.
Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz.
Well, and yes, there's another example, right? So I haven't seen that as much. And it's interesting because when, you and I first started talking about pet, right, we struggled to find that line between passionate pet owners and anybody with a channel that was truly giving, let's just call it generic pet advice from the perspective of an expert. It's a little bit of a gap. Have you seen that change? Or when you think about let's just go dive into it. How do you think about influencers in the traditional TikTok, YouTube sense? And then how do you integrate veterinarians as influencers? Is it a completely different strategy and tactic, or are those two coming together in any interesting ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a bleeding edge right now, to be perfectly honest. And I think, there's always been this line between science, right? And really being kind of true to the profession and to the subject, and influencing for marketing's sake, right? And you've got to figure out kind of that right balance. And I think human health has already taken a step over the line, if you will, where you've gotten, some doctors who are starting to play that role of influencers. And it'll be really interesting to see how the consumer perceives that, right? And I'd be curious to see what you guys have found on your side, to be perfectly honest, because I think animal health is behind human health in a few different ways, and definitely from that perspective, I think we we certainly have veterinarians and individuals who are willing and able to play, kind of an influencer role, like a TikTok type of influencer role, versus kind of on the, pure science side. Again, I'm not sure consumers are yet ready to have that be as believable. But I don't know that to be 100% true either. And so I think there's a certain amount of credibility that these influencers need to have. And I think importantly, focusing on topics that make sense within an influencer community, right? Key disease states that your pet might have that look more like, hey, informational for consumers, right? I'm going to help you understand your pet's state. I'm going to help you understand how to manage it and what to expect. Versus kind of a more of a salesy play. I think this is more about information more than anything.
From what I've seen, and I haven't, dug in deep enough to truly say this for fact, but certainly from my own sort of personal experience and expertise in the space, what I'm seeing right now, I think is a very interesting trend. I don't think people are talking about it as much as I'm seeing it, is what I'd call the rise of the expert. And I almost feel like there's this, and it covers doctors, but it also covers different kinds of scientists, professors of all stripes, where for a while it was like, yeah, I'm not going to get involved in this social media stuff. One, there's ethical challenges with it. Two, it's just a bunch of noise. No one's paying attention and no one's caring. And then couldn't tell you who lit the spark, but I think at some point that has, and it literally could be a political reaction to quote the movement of fake news, where I think a lot of people have said, okay, YouTube, TikTok, these platforms aren't going away. And the world has a problem that is, again, quote, fake news. I'm an expert. I at least want the truth to be out there. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to state it. And I'm going to state it in a way that is, authentic, appealing, charismatic. And so again, as opposed to some of the early versions of this where, doctors sitting behind their desk in their office, monologuing at a screen. Now you get multiple doctors and they're in an operating room and they're having this interesting bantering dialogue. They'll bring in other guests, experts in different fields. And so, and I think this is happening, not just on YouTube, but across TikTok. And so this kind of rise of the expert, I'm definitely seeing in the medical field, and where they draw the line is they don't give specific medical advice. They share general medical knowledge in a space. And it's a fine line, but it's a line that they're walking. I haven't seen the same thing yet in animal, but there is no doubt that that's a wide open and incredibly appealing, because as confused as we are about our own experience and they're hungry for this information, when you translate it into the animal world, one, it's equally, if not more confusing, but B, there's just so much more potential. The content has the potential to be even more engaging. I mean, you're back to, let's combine, cats doing interesting things with now some real useful information about cats or horses or dogs. Right. I think it's there. And, that'd be a fun thing for us to mutually explore on the side at some point, because it wasn't there, even a year ago, I'd say, for sure.
No, I think you're onto something. And I think today's Gen Z generation is going to have even a more complex time than ever before trying to deal with, where do I get my information? What's true, what's not, right? And how do I form my different opinions? And I think ultimately, at least what I'm seeing, my teenagers and my college students doing is really, they're pulling from all their different sources of information. And I think that's where this kind of expert influencer starts to play a really important role. The consumer knowing that, hey, this might not be the end story and the whole story, but this is creating a combination for me so that I can get a better feel for what's going on with my dog or what's going on with my cat or how I might want to treat it together with my veterinarian's recommendation, right? And so I think there's a very, very real space there for sure. I think it's super interesting. I love to try something like that.
Are there other ways? So one, I do feel like animal health, you picked it because it's a passion category for you. but I do feel like it's a category that's seen some tremendous growth. I mean, just
Yeah.
macro. And it seems like there's a ton of interest in, whether it's the next stage of, okay, my animals are, I should treat them, again, not like people per se, but
Yeah,
like they are
for sure.
it's a living
Part of your
being,
family.
right? A
Yeah,
part of my family. Exactly.
for sure.
And so how is it still different from working in human health? And do you feel like there is still space for tons of innovation, or is it just become incredibly competitive like all the other verticals you've worked in? Where are
Sure.
we in the evolution of animal health
Yeah.
as a category?
Yeah, I think animal health right now, we are at an incredibly amazing beginning spot in the sense that we've got this consumer behavior that shifted so massively around, not just with COVID, it started before COVID too, about treating your pets as a member of the family. You saw dog food make a huge shift out of kind of your traditional pedigrees and IAMs that was available in the grocery store and everybody, your Alpos type of thing, into some really, unique custom formulations for pets. So Blue Buffalo, that we had at General Mills is a great example of a family who was trying to treat a pet. His name was Blue, and they just started cooking up some food on their stove, right? And it was like, how do I can't find what he needs in the grocery store, and this dog needs to be part of my family. I'm going to do what it takes, right? That's a great founding story for a lot of different pet foods, and I think that's to me, that's the rocket engine behind animal health in a really big bad way, because consumers are looking to treat their pets, as they would treat their own. And so having options available to them that allow them to kind of complete the care of their pet in the way that they'd like is really an important thing. And Elanco is playing a leadership role in doing so. And was one of the most attractive components of why I came over, to the space overall. So it's a really neat time to be here. And from a competitive standpoint, I think you're seeing the same type of insight come to all of the animal health players right now, which is great. And in a way, good competition makes for better growth, right? Because together we all rise, really. And that's sort of what we're seeing. Different players have different strengths, as they always do. And we know where to run our race, and our competitors are doing the same on their end. And collectively, we're bringing pet parents and pet owners better and better solutions to keep their dogs living, and their cats and their horses living longer, more healthier, more productive lives. And so we're seeing the geriatric pet and treatments needed for the geriatric pet be something that's massively on the rise. So an osteoarthritis medication like a Galliprant is something that's really important to our veterinarians and their clients and our consumers, because it keeps big dogs comfortable for longer periods of their lives.
Feels like it is very hand in hand with human health. The two pieces, two elements are going through sort of similar transitions. And thinking about quality of life is kind of what I really heard there. Not
That's
only
right.
lifespan, but health span. All right, I want to jump to a couple areas of, we can call it e-commerce, we can call it shopper, and get your sense of where the market's at. And we'll go back first, and then we'll go forward. So some of the most successful stuff you and I ever worked on together was trying to convince shoppers to trust and try subscription programs like Amazon
Oh,
Subscribe
sure.
and Save.
Yeah, yeah.
And so exciting. And
Yeah.
so I'm sort of curious, from where you sit, are we done there? Are we still educating consumers on services and how to buy and where to buy, not where to buy, like where's it in stock, but like this is a better way for you to consume this product, whether it be subscription or online pickup or some other kind of service? Or do you think people have kind of figured it out at this point and we've moved on to other elements, and maybe those are things like the Fetch and the brand clubs? Like where's the shopper in comfortability and understanding of all the tools at their disposal in their e-commerce shopping kit, if you will?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in two different ways. One, do I think that that there is kind of ubiquitous or well-penetrated awareness of something like a subscribe and save? And I would say the answer is yes. I mean, the whole auto ship model of being able to get something to my house on a regular basis, I think has applied itself across almost every category. And I think your expectation as a consumer is that if it's something that I want repeatedly, I probably can get it repeatedly, whether it's from Amazon or another retailer, or, or some other item that I'm looking for. And so I think that the sheer driving awareness, which you and I did in our early days and had just a ton of success. I remember some of those ROAS as they were out of control. And that's just sheer, you don't know what you don't know, right? So these were consumers who just didn't know. And now all of a sudden they're like, holy cow, light bulb. And now I can do something I couldn't do before. The awareness piece of it is over, in the sense that I think people are very aware and it's available, which is an awesome thing, because my favorite part of spinning up e-commerce is retention and sticky paths to purchase. And auto ship and subscribe and save, all those mechanisms allow us as brand marketers to draw people and keep people within our franchises for lengths of time. And so now that there's awareness, it's like, whew, okay, half the work's been done, 3/4 of the work's been done, because people are aware, they understand the benefits, and now you can just apply the lever. Right now you can just figure out, okay, how do I want to talk to my consumers about this? What sorts of offers do I want to make? What makes somebody want to stay in auto ship versus not? We're always amazed at some of our products that have very long purchase cycles, that people are subscribing to our items. And that's, I think, just speaking to, a variety of kind of consumer behavior in terms of, wanting to feel like they've got themselves covered.
So let's go from that to one that I know is not played out yet, which is, and some of those programs, those early programs we did in conjunction with Amazon advertising,
Sure.
which is now become sort of the at the forefront of this massive movement called retail media. And but it was nascent at the time.
Yeah.
Now I'd say it's potentially the number one thing happening in shopper marketing, shopper marketing, shopper media. You talked about it early on, but tell me about that. It's exploding. What are you most excited about? What does it mean for the next couple of years? And how does somebody get started in it if they're generally in the brand space? Let's say they're a smaller brand, up and coming. What's the first thing they do to get going in retail media? What are they looking for, and where do they go?
Yeah, so retail media to me is kind of the end all be all of digital media at the end of the day, right? Because now you can see conversion and you can understand if the advertisement you placed actually created the consumer behavior that you were looking for. For the longest time, we were operating in this industry off of click-through rates, right? And impressions. It was like, okay, that's all we could know. Click-through rates and impressions, or, in reverse order, is what we kind of understood. And so being able to attribute and understand that behavior, and then really use the power of audiences across these retailer platforms, is what's so exciting. To me, the thing that's just so cool to watch each of these retailers do is they're coming into their own, and they're understanding how they can monetize the data that they have. And one might say, okay, well, great, it's just trying to make another dime. Well, sure, but at the same time, you're offering us really rich opportunities that we have not had in the past. And so, being able to access the types of audiences and the types of planning that's going on, at a retailer like Amazon with Amazon ads. Instacart's another great example. Criteo is doing some great work with Target, Kroger. Of course, Media Network is knee deep in really building some just enormously helpful capabilities. That sort of thing is really exciting. And so I look forward to all of the retailers taking their capabilities to the next level, because you've got some really good thinkers and some really interesting ideas coming out of those various retailer platforms.
Do you think there's a day where we think of Amazon more as a media company than as a seller of products? Is that
well, I'd say Amazon already thinks they're a media company, right? They've got a vertical Amazon ads. That's their media company. There you go. I mean, their ecosystem and their footprint is pretty significant. So yes, I think the day is here. You saw, I think it was like the 2017, 2016 timeframe, where all of a sudden you saw more dollars being poured into retail media than you saw, in digital kind of overall awareness reach media, which is amazing. And what retail media has also managed to do in a very effective way is play the full funnel, right? So it's not just conversion based media. It's all the OTT they sell, all the awareness based reach. So if you are a brand and you just want to use Amazon for reach, you can do that. They've got that scale, right? You also asked about if you are new and you're trying to figure out, or you're a smaller brand and you're trying to figure out how you kind of use retail media. Media has different definitions depending on who you talk to. And some people think about media as just display. Some people think about retail media as display plus retail search. And, if you are a digitally native brand, or if you're a new brand or a small brand, start with search. I mean, that's really, you got to get your search spend right first before you really delve into any sort of display in a scaled way. The two work together, right? Media and search, no doubt, but you need to start with the search piece, because that's really where the consumer behavior is at. So get that right first. Think about, your business's key season, but be sure to be always on, because there's big ramifications to the algorithms that run your search campaigns, negative ramifications if you're trying to turn search on and off and use it as we're going to pilot it 1 month and see what happens and then turn it back off. You've got to turn it on and leave it on.
Instacart. So
Yeah.
Instacart, you've been
cool retailer.
you've been a huge proponent of them. I think all the way back to Kimberly Clark, but certainly at General Mills.
Yeah.
You spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about and supporting Instacart.
Sure.
I know.
Sure.
Where do you think they are today? Are there still things you're like, I wish they could bring these two things together or close this gap? Or do you feel like it is like the runway is clear, like all in investment, and you can see the conversions, you can get the kind of media buys that you want? Like, what is it like working with them, again, understanding they are basically layered on top of a bunch of individual retailers underneath them? So what are you most excited about? Maybe that's the specific question to ask with Instacart.
So I've got kind of a two-part answer to this. So Instacart's such a cool model, and it's such an interesting platform, and their consumer proposition was so powerful. And it's with kind of all things COVID, they just rocketed out of the the hemisphere, autosphere, whatever it's called. And that was, it's been a really cool experience with them. They brought their ad platform to bear, and there was a learning curve for sure for them in terms of, what manufacturers could buy, how we could segment, how we could use audiences. We had a lot of asks around with some of the kind of early notions of brand stores on Amazon, but co-locating products within Instacart's experience. So think of it as like, people, you're shopping for dinner, right? You're shopping for breakfast, you're shopping for school lunches. You're not shopping for eggs, right? Well, sometimes you are, but a lot of times there's like a solution that a consumer has in their mind's eye. So being able to be solution focused and portfolio focused is something that Instacart has been, working hard at and making, I think, some really great strides in. And so those sorts of opportunities to leverage with the retailer, or with the intermediary, which is really what Instacart is, has been massively accretive for manufacturers. And I think Instacart's on a good trajectory. They had some really great leadership in place to stand up their ads platform, and that team made, from my perspective, a lot of really great decisions as they put their platform together. So good for them. I think the thing that retail media in general, and this is going to be kind of near and dear to your heart, I think the next horizon is social commerce being tied into retail media, because I think social commerce is so interesting and so influential for consumers, especially when you think about kind of this path to purchase being this web of, more so than anything. You could be in shopping mode, sitting and watching your YouTube video, no doubt. We all know this, right? This is kind of old news, but how do you combine that social commerce experience and the influencers, your kind of traditional TikTok influencers and if that's even a word, traditional TikTok influencers and the expert influencers that we were talking about, right? How do you fold that social component into retail media? And, that's some of the spaces that a Fetch and a Brand Club are pressing on right now, which I think is powerful and super interesting in terms of how we're all going to have access to use levers like that.
When you think about a Fetch or a Brand Club, and maybe just generically with influencers, when you think of influencers, do you think of them, I mean, maybe divided up into the buckets? When I think of a Fetch and Brand Club, I assume a lot of that is peer-to-peer communication of deals, offers, value, let's almost call it closer to akin to the old text reviews kind of credentialing.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is, but relatively anonymous. Like I'm not necessarily thinking about Laura's recommendations. I'm thinking, okay, Laura's part of, Fetch. I am. She says this is a great deal. I'm there. Then there is awareness, which you call the traditional TikTok influencer. So let me get an influencer to talk about my product on their channel, which has a lot of followers, right?
Yeah.
And so that's general awareness. And then there is, something that, again, that you were very early that we explored a lot together very successfully, which is influencers like that TikTok influencer, or maybe these experts that we hope are going to emerge in the space, creating content that you can then repurpose and put it on a product detail page,
Sure.
put it in your own social media, maybe put it into a Fetch. Well, one, are you playing across all? Do you think of it as across all three, or is it one or two of those buckets? Is there one or two of those buckets you'd be more or less excited about? Where's your
I think
success?
it's all three. And I think the third to me is where there's the least examples of live work, right? Of how do you kind of embed some of the success that you've had with a TikTok or a YouTube influencer into a retail media experience or into a Fetch or a Brand Club experience. So absolutely, there's the users who could be influencers for sure, right? So I can go tell, my network of friends, I got $5 off. Yay. That's a really cool thing. But how do you take some of the power of the audience that lives in the TikTok world and in the YouTube world, and how do you bring that to influence a Fetch or a Brand Club? And that's where kind of consumer engagement, to your question earlier on, consumer engagement and commerce start to all come together as one, right?
Yep.
And starts to make a lot of sense. And so, I think there's a ton of unexplored space there, untapped space right now across so many different sorts of categories, because you could start to go into some really interesting places of gaming, right? And in the gaming platforms and connecting that in with both these engagement platforms and retail media. We did a little bit of that at General Mills, and I'm sure the team is kind of taking that on even more so because we had a lot of success with it.
We've long espoused the idea of, taking that content and repurposing it, and there's always been challenges, right? You start with do I have the rights to do this? Do I have physical possession of the asset? Right? Who's going to translate the asset from an editing perspective, especially if it's video, to make sense in these different contexts? And even as we've knocked down maybe some of those hurdles, you just ultimately still end up with the organizational hurdle of like, who's going to do it? And so
Right.
it is the holy grail, but it is one that just kind of continues to be challenging to get to. But yes, we are huge believers in that. You said back in 2019 in an interview that I found,
oh my goodness,
that in e-commerce, everything was figure outable. And I love that quote.
is that a Dr. Seuss word that I made up?
Yes, you did. You admitted at the time. You're like, I don't know if it's a word, but I'm making it one right now. And one, I thought this is quintessentially Laura. And I was like, and what I read in it, I read obviously optimism. Everything is figure outable. They're super optimistic. But at the same time, there's this underlying tension or frustration almost in there that it's like, but it's not easy or obvious.
Right.
And I, Laura, however, will conquer. And so that's what I read.
Thank you for reading that in,
Yeah.
for sure. I'm sure my children will have some feedback on that one. They're like, no,
Yes.
mom, everything's not figure outable, but maybe.
Yes. Determination will take you far.
That's true.
That's the lesson for your children.
Fortune favors the bold.
Yes.
There you
And
go.
so my question is,
Yeah.
knowing that's who you are, if you could snap your fingers right now and make one more thing true in e-commerce/shopper, what would it be?
Connecting all of the audiences on the retail media side with our DV360 so that we are truly full funnel. Because right now we've got so much power within retail media, which is awesome. And we have so much power with our, kind of traditional trade desk buys, and our DV360 buys. And we've got some really just super talented media folks that get really deep into, how do we do audiences and how do we better segment and how do we create better ways in which our campaigns are helping and influencing our consumers. But we don't have the ability as an industry right now to plug the data together very easily. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? And there's a lot of reasons why they might stay separate. But if I had to snap my fingers and make it figure outable, to use my quote, I suppose, that I think would be very cool, is if you truly could see across the full funnel and kind of hook these data pieces up together.
Is there anything else you are excited about that you think will happen in the next year or two, or a place where you're saying we need to shift much more aggressively in this direction or that direction, or prepare for, this event, which is going to happen in the next 6 months? And again, I know you're going to keep leaning into retail media, but anything you see maybe that's going to shift the landscape that you're preparing for?
I think we're going to see a balancing effect is probably where I'm going to go with this, which is e-commerce is growing, is going to continue to grow. When it was first kind of in the space, so back when you and I first started working together, I think the prediction is okay, e-com might be 5% of anybody's business, right? At the end of the day, it's now, somewhere between 10 and 60%, depending on your category and your brand and that sort of thing. It was accelerated big time over COVID, but I think there's a rebalancing happening, right? Which is, there was all these predictions of, okay, in-store is going to go away and it's all going to be about web rooming. And, it's just, people are just going to want to see what's in store but they're going to buy it all online. I think that we, as human beings, like homeostasis, right? We like balance. And I think the world massively shifted into e-commerce. I don't know that anybody expected COVID to happen. So we have this kind of, all things acceleration over just a few months. A lot of that behavior is here to stay. So Instacart is a great example of that, right? And I think that business model is here to stay. But I also think that there's going to be this kind of balance that starts to sort itself out about how consumers use online in their worlds and how offline plays a role depending on their stage of life and what they need that day, what kind of products they're looking for. I don't think there's going to be this only online shopper and only offline shopper. It's all about kind of solutions for us and trying to figure out the right way to balance our crazy lives. So.
I love that. I think that's exactly right. And it is interesting because I feel like shopping used to be a chore. That's the thing. And then again, when you're thinking about the linear path, when you think about a linear path, that's a problem-solving kind of path. That's a problem-solving experience. And I think what's amazing about what e-commerce and all the other innovations that have come along, it's sort of taken so much of the friction out of shopping that it's almost, and by the way, I'm seriously just riffing off what you just said. Maybe we stop thinking about it as a problem because there's so many alternatives to get what I want, when I want, how I want it, right, that it does become a bit more of an exploration, right? And if I want something now for my refrigerator for dinner tonight, I can get delivery in the next 3 hours through multiple sources. But if I want to think about something that's going to enhance my life,
Mhm.
I can go into a store and I can touch
That's
it and I
right.
can feel it.
Or
I
if I
can read
want the
reviews.
experience, like maybe I've got an extra couple hours and kids' activities got canceled this afternoon. So now I am going to go pick out my own tomatoes, right? And I'm going to look at the grapes and I'm going to decide which lemons I want, right? And maybe that's an interesting luxury. I know I can press Instacart, right? I can have it all delivered. That's cool. I can definitely do that. But I think it's again about this balance of, how do we create balance in our lives? And I think you see a lot of, how do we ensure that we are installing, self-care and, what's our, what's our operating procedure each day for ourselves. And I think there's a degree of, again, all things digital and all things commerce have allowed for an acceleration and kind of this cool new way to get things to our house and fix all the different needs that we have. But I think consumers are going to find a balance between their analog world and their digital world.
Well, that seems like the perfect place to wrap up this conversation. I hope our
Yay.
viewers got half as much out of the conversation as I did.
Cool.
I learned a lot, as I always do when we're talking. And
Ditto.
this was incredible. So thank you, Laura.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And it's always great to spend some time with somebody who's been in the industry for a while and get us both thinking a little bit more about how the world's going to look in the next coming years and months.
Love it. All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Generation Influence drop every Wednesday. So be sure to check us out and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can find information on next week's guest in the description below. Hope to see you then and there.